Okay, so we are looking at part 3 of project 3. This is the last part. I don't have 4 parts to this project. I put everything into 3 parts. So this is the last part. Here on the left hand side, I have part 2. So we can see where we left off. So, and here I have part 3 where I've added the changes. So if you look at here in part 2 on the left hand side, we have all the files. The files are the same. We've done all the files. Video list, video.h, video.cpp, video list.h and cpp, tools.h and cpp, main.cpp, no main.h, and videos.txt. So you should have your song.txt when you tar your folder for me, okay? In here, if you look at video list.h, that's where the changes are, okay? The class for video doesn't change. We are done with that. The video list.h has 3 functions that we did in part 2. This is where we ended: add video, search, and print. Now, if we look at video list.h for part 3, here's what I've added. I've added remove and write back to the file. Okay, so those are the 2 things that we're going to look at. And that should complete the whole thing. So on the left hand side, I'm going to CD to part 3 so we can take a look at the implementation for this. So video list.cpp, tools.h was all done. I didn't make any changes to that. We'll take a look at it in a minute. I don't think I did. So all of this will be the same. The constructor from the file, the default constructor, none of this has changed between part 2 and part 3. Okay. And then if you go down, here is the remove function that I added. So if you look at the very bottom is a remove function. You ask the user, enter the index of the video you want to delete or the song. So when you print the songs, ideally, you should have something that says I. So it prints the number. See, in my print, I'm printing the number, which is the index. So when you print the list, it looks nice. So the user has the index to tell you which one to delete. So remove says, enter the index you want to delete, and I call my readInt function. Every time you read an integer, you should call the readInt function. Then you check if it is less than count. And remember, we are sitting in the class, which is why I can access count. If you're in main, then you cannot access this count. This count belongs to the list class, that object. Remember that. So if del index is less than count, for int I equals del index, I less than count, we shift. You shift everything up and copy it over that item that we want to delete, and we decrement count. Don't forget. And count again is part of the array, which is part of the object in the class. Okay, and we are sitting in the class, which is why I have my scope resolution operator. So this function remove video can access, list, and count without having to call our accessors and things like that. Okay, so remove video does that. Write data writes it all to a file. So you get the file name. Now this file name is the same as your input file. It's not different. It has to be the same file because then you can write it out and save it to that file and then read it back from there. Declare a local OFStream out file variable, open the file, just go through the array and call print video, but pass this. Remember, we have another print video. If you go back to your video.h file, remember we created the second print video function here that we have written. Okay, this is the one. And if you look at the implementation for that, it simply does an output to the file, out file, instead of to cout, instead of to the screen. That's all that does. And so we go through a for loop and we pretty much just call that function for every item in the list and it prints itself to the file. Those are the only 2 changes that I have made. Okay, as far as video list.h and video list.cpp. Now let's look at tools.cpp. I believe I have not made any changes to this. We still have all of these functions, which was there before. The only change you do need to make is you need to go, yes, you do need to make this change in tools.cpp. You need to go in and you need to uncomment the store.remove video, remove song function, and uncomment this as well. Okay, that's the change that you need to make in tools.cpp. On this side, I will go to main.cpp. You need to make a change in main.cpp. you need to go at the very end of your while loop and you need to call the write data function. So those are the two functions that we just saw how to do in videolist.h and videolist.cpp. We've implemented those functions, we need to call them. So in main.cpp, here you call the write data function. In tools.cpp, under remove R or D or whatever you have to delete, you need to call these two functions. And that will take care of calling those two functions. So you need to make changes to 4 files. Okay, so let's start and do a quick recap. You need to make changes to videolist.h. You need to add these two function prototypes. On the left hand side, videolist.cpp, you need to actually write those functions. The very end of my, here you go, you actually have to write those two functions. Okay, then on this side, you go to main.cpp. On this side, I will go to tools.cpp just to show you where I call those two functions. In main.cpp, here's where you call the write data at the end of your main. And in execute command in tools.cpp, you should add these two lines under R or D or whatever your case is to delete. And that will complete our project. And if you test it, it should be able to do everything, load from the file, load from the file. If I say R to remove, it should print everything for me and say, tell me the index. I enter 1. And if I do D to display, my happy feet from 1 is gone. And then if I try to search by title, and if I type in something, it should print it up for me. And I should be able to add and so on and so forth, right? All of those things were working before. So that is the end of project